The notification pinged at 2:37 a.m., a sharp sound slicing through the silence of my Chicago apartment. I jolted upright, heart racing, the glow of my phone illuminating the dark like a beacon calling me to the edge of a cliff. His message read, "I'm closer than you think, Ethan. Meet me soon. I'm Ethan Caldwell, 32, a data analyst who spends 9 hours a day crunching numbers in a glass-walled office in the Loop. My life is predictable. Excel spreadsheets, coffee runs, and the hum of the L train rattling past my window. But 6 months ago, I stumbled into a late-night Reddit thread about obscure Chicago jazz clubs, and there he was, Wanderer 92. His words were sharp, poetic, laced with a quiet intensity that hooked me from the first reply. We moved to private messages, then to a chat app I'd never heard of, one that promised anonymity. He called himself Kai. No last name, no face, just a voice in the void that felt like home. Chicago's autumn was brutal that year, the wind slicing through my jacket as I walked to work, but Kai's messages warmed me. "What's the view like from your office?" he'd ask, and I'd send him a photo of the skyline, the Willis Tower piercing the clouds. He'd reply with cryptic details, a line about the lake's shimmer, a memory of a street performer on Michigan Avenue, but never enough to pin him down. I imagined him as a writer, maybe, or a drifter with secrets, his life as untethered as mine was rigid. By October, I was falling hard. Our chats stretched into the early hours, his words painting a world where I wasn't just a cog in a corporate machine. "You're more than your job, Ethan," he wrote once. "You're a story waiting to unfold." I told him things I'd never told anyone. How I came out at 25, how my family's silence still stung, how I'd always felt like I was waiting for something bigger. He listened, or at least his words made it feel that way. But he never shared his face, his voice, or his real name. "It's safer this way," he'd say, and I'd laugh it off, ignoring the unease creeping into my chest. The first red flag came in November. I'd suggested meeting at a coffee shop in Wicker Park, a neutral spot, public, safe. His reply was instant. "Not yet. I'm not who you think I am." My stomach twisted, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was shy or cautious or just not ready. I wasn't ready either, not to admit how much I needed him to be real. My days were gray without his messages. My nights lit up by the promise of his words. I was an office worker in Chicago, but Kai was my escape, my mystery, my maybe. Then came the night of the 2:37 a.m. message. I stared at my phone, the words, "I'm closer than you think," burning into me. Closer? How? I hadn't told him my address, my workplace, nothing beyond vague details about my life. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but fear stopped me from replying. Instead, I scrolled through our chat history, searching for clues. He'd mentioned a diner on Clark Street once, a jazz club in Hyde Park another time. Did he live here? Was he watching me? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but it wasn't just fear. It was thrill, too. I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. The next morning, I called in sick, something I hadn't done in 3 years. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee gone cold, and typed a reply. "Where are you, Kai? Let's meet. Today." My heart pounded as I hit send, the message vanishing into the encrypted void. Hours passed with no response. By noon, I was pacing, my apartment feeling smaller, the walls closing in. I needed answers. I needed him. I grabbed my coat and headed to the diner he'd mentioned, a hole in the wall called Rosie's on Clark Street. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside, the smell of burnt coffee and bacon hitting me. The place was half empty, a few regulars hunched over their plates. I scanned every face, every pair of eyes, searching for someone who might be Kai. A man in his late 20s sat alone in a corner booth, his dark hair falling over sharp cheekbones, his fingers tapping nervously on a mug. Could it be him? My pulse quickened, but when I approached, he looked up, confused, and I mumbled an apology. Not Kai. I left Rosie's and wandered the city, chasing fragments of him. The jazz club in Hyde Park was closed, its windows dark. The street performer he'd described on Michigan Avenue was nowhere to be found. By dusk, I was in Lincoln Park, the skyline glowing against the fading light. My phone buzzed. A new message. You're looking for me, aren't you? Be careful, Ethan. Not everyone is who they seem. I froze, my breath catching. How did he know I was looking? Was he here in the park watching me? I spun around, scanning the faces of joggers, dog walkers, couples on benches. No one stood out, but the weight of being watched pressed against me. I typed back, "Who are you, Kai? What do you want?" No reply came. That night, I barely slept, my dreams a tangle of faceless figures and encrypted messages. The next day, I went to work, but my focus was shot. My coworker, Lena, a 29-year-old graphic designer with a knack for reading people, noticed. "You okay, Ethan?" she asked, her brown eyes narrowing. I wanted to tell her about Kai, about the messages, the unease, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded and buried myself in spreadsheets, trying to drown out the questions in my head. By the end of the week, Kai's messages had stopped. The silence was worse than the cryptic texts. I felt like I'd lost something vital, like a piece of me had vanished into the digital ether. But on Friday night, as I left the office, my phone buzzed again. "Meet me tomorrow, Ethan. Lincoln Park, by the lagoon, 7 p.m. I'll wear a red scarf." My heart leapt, then sank. Tomorrow. A real meeting. A real person. But the words, "be careful," Ethan, echoed in my mind. Who was Kai? Was he the escape I'd been craving? Or something darker? I didn't know, but I knew I'd be there in Lincoln Park, waiting for the man in the red scarf. Because even if he was my final goodbye, I needed to know why. Saturday arrived like a storm cloud, heavy and inevitable. I stood by the Lincoln Park Lagoon at 6:45 p.m., the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves and lake water. My hands shook as I checked my phone. No new messages from Kai, just the same cryptic instruction. Lincoln Park, by the lagoon, 7 p.m. I'll wear a red scarf. I wore my navy jacket, the one I'd mentioned to Kai once, hoping it would make me recognizable. The park was alive with evening joggers and families, but as the minutes ticked closer to 7, the crowd thinned. The skyline glowed in the distance, its lights reflecting off the water, and I felt exposed, like a character in a story I didn't fully understand. I scanned every approaching figure, my eyes locking on anyone with a flash of red. A woman in a crimson coat passed by, not him. A teenager with a red backpack, definitely not him. My stomach churned with equal parts hope and dread. At exactly 7:03, I saw him. A man, late 20s, male, with sharp features and dark, expressive eyes, stood across the lagoon, a red scarf loosely draped around his neck. He was lean, dressed in a black sweater and jeans, his posture hesitant but deliberate. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just us. Me, Ethan Caldwell, the office worker who'd spent months falling for a stranger's words, and him, the mystery I'd chased across Chicago. He raised a hand, a small wave, and my heart stuttered. I walked toward him, each step heavier than the last. Up close, his face was striking, high cheekbones, a faint scar above his left eyebrow, eyes that held a storm of emotions. "Ethan?" he said, his voice soft but clear, with a slight tremor. I nodded, unable to speak. He smiled, a nervous, fleeting thing, and said, "I'm Kai, or I guess I'm Owen, actually." Owen. The name hit me like a revelation. Not Kai, not Wanderer 92, but Owen. A real person standing here breathing the same air. Why the fake name? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He looked away, his fingers twisting the edge of his scarf. "It's complicated," he said. "Can we sit?" We found a bench by the water. The cities hum a distant backdrop. Owen's story came in fragments, each word heavy with hesitation. He was 28, a freelance coder who'd grown up in a small town in Wisconsin, where being openly gay wasn't an option. He'd moved to Chicago 2 years ago, chasing freedom, but found himself isolated, hiding behind screens and aliases. Kai was safer, he said, a way to connect without risking everything. I wanted to be angry, but his vulnerability disarmed me. I told him about my life, my routine, my loneliness, how his messages had been a lifeline. He listened, his eyes never leaving mine, and when I finished, he reached out, his hand brushing mine. The touch was electric, grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said. "The closer than you think thing I was in your neighborhood that night at a bar. I saw you walk by, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. You saw me?" The thought sent a chill through me, not because it felt invasive, but because I'd been so close to him without knowing. "Why didn't you just tell me?" "I was scared," he admitted. "I'm not good at this, at being real, but I want to be with you." The moment hung between us, fragile and raw. I wanted to believe him, to lean into the warmth of his presence, but doubt gnawed at me. Why the secrecy? Why the cryptic messages? Before I could ask, he pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. A blurry shot of a street corner, my street corner, taken at night. "This was the night I saw you," he said. "I didn't follow you. I was there, and so were you." I stared at the photo, my mind racing. It was real, undeniable proof he'd been close, but it didn't answer everything. "What's the catch, Owen?" I asked. "Why all the mystery?" He hesitated, then said, "There's something I haven't told you. It's not just about me being scared. It's bigger." He glanced around, as if checking for eavesdroppers, and lowered his voice. "I got into some trouble a while back. Not legal trouble, but people. People who don't like who I am, or what I've done." My pulse quickened. "What kind of people?" He shook his head. "Not here. Not now. Just trust me. Okay? I'll tell you everything, but I need time." I wanted to press him, to demand answers, but the look in his eyes, fear mixed with something softer, something real, stopped me. Instead, I nodded, and we sat in silence, the city's lights shimmering across the lagoon. For the first time in months, I felt seen not just by Owen, but by myself. I was more than an office worker. I was someone who could take a chance on a mystery, even if it scared me. We walked through the park as night fell, talking about lighter things, his love for jazz, my obsession with Chicago's deep dish pizza. He laughed, a sound that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, and I realized I was falling for him all over again. This time for the man in front of me, not just the words on a screen. But as we parted ways, him promising to text me tomorrow, a shadow lingered. His mention of people who didn't like him echoed in my mind, a warning I couldn't ignore. The next week was a blur of stolen moments. Owen texted daily, no longer as Kai but as himself, sharing bits of his life. A favorite coffee shop in Logan Square, a coding project he was proud of. We met again, this time for coffee, then for a walk along the lakefront. Each meeting peeled back another layer of him, but the deeper questions remained unanswered. Who was after him? Why the secrecy? And why did I feel like every moment with him was borrowed time? By the end of the week, I was hooked, but uneasy. Lena noticed again, cornering me at the office. "You're different," she said, her voice gentle but probing. "Is it a guy?" I hesitated, then told her about Owen, leaving out the cryptic parts. She grinned, but her eyes were serious. "Just be careful, Ethan. Love's great, but it can blind you." Her words stuck with me as I left work that night, my phone buzzing with a new message from Owen. "Meet me tonight?" Same place, 8 p.m. I'm ready to tell you everything. The lagoon in Lincoln Park was darker this time, the water reflecting the city's lights like a fractured mirror. I arrived early, my breath visible in the chilly November air, my mind a tangle of hope and suspicion. Owen's message, "I'm ready to tell you everything," felt like a promise and a warning, and I wasn't sure which scared me more. He appeared at 8:05, his red scarf a splash of color against the night. His face was tense, his usual warmth replaced by something guarded. "Ethan," he said, his voice low, "thanks for coming." We sat on the same bench as before, but this time, the space between us felt charged, like the air before a storm. "I owe you the truth," he began, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I wasn't just hiding because I'm shy. I'm running from people I crossed a long time ago." He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the water. "Back in Wisconsin, I got mixed up with some bad folks. Not criminals exactly, but a group. They called themselves a community, but it was more like a cult. They didn't take kindly to me leaving, or to me being who I am." I frowned, trying to piece it together. "A cult? What did they want with you?" Owen's laugh was bitter. "Control. They wanted me to fit their mold, straight, obedient, invisible. When I came out, they didn't just shun me. They threatened me, said they'd make sure I'd never feel safe again." He glanced at me, his eyes searching. "I thought moving to Chicago would be enough. New city, new life. But they've got long memories. And connections." My heart sank. "Are they still after you?" He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "I've seen signs. A car parked outside my apartment too long. Messages from burner accounts, warning me to stay quiet. I don't know how they found me, but they did." He paused, his voice softening. "That's why I was so cagey with you. I didn't want you caught up in this." The weight of his words settled over me. I'd fallen for a man with a past, a man on the run. But instead of pulling away, I felt a fierce need to protect him. "Why tell me now?" I asked. "Because I'm tired of running," he said, his voice breaking. "And because I'm falling for you, Ethan. I can't keep lying to you. You deserve to know who I am, and what you're getting into." His confession hit me like a wave, warm and overwhelming. I reached for his hand, his fingers cold but steady against mine. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "But we need a plan. You can't keep running forever." For the first time that night, he smiled, a small, grateful thing. "I was hoping you'd say that." Over the next few days, we became a team. Owen shared more details, vague descriptions of the group, their leader, a man named Victor who'd once been his mentor. They weren't just homophobic. They were obsessive, believing they could fix people like Owen through intimidation and control. He'd escaped 3 years ago, but they tracked him to Chicago, likely through his online activity. "I wasn't careful enough," he admitted. "I thought Kai would keep me hidden." I suggested he stay offline, delete his accounts, but he shook his head. "They already know I'm here. Hiding won't help now." Instead, we decided to gather evidence, screenshots of the threatening messages, photos of the suspicious car he'd seen. I wasn't a detective, just an office worker, but I'd watched enough true crime to know we needed proof if we were going to the police. Lena became our unexpected ally. I confided in her one lunch break, unable to keep it all inside. She listened, her eyes wide, then said, "You're in deep, Ethan, but I've got your back." She offered to help us track IP addresses from the burner accounts, using skills I didn't know she had. "I dabbled in cybersecurity before design," she said with a grin. "Let's see what we can find." By mid-November, we had a small dossier, screenshots, timestamps, even a partial license plate from the car Owen had seen. But the more we dug, the more I realized how real the danger was. One night, as we walked back from a diner, Owen grabbed my arm, pulling me into an alley. "That car," he whispered. pointing to a black SUV idling across the street. It's them. My heart pounded as we crouched in the shadows, the SUV's headlights cutting through the dark. It didn't move, but its presence was enough to make my skin crawl. When it finally drove off, Owen was shaking. "They're getting bolder," he said. "I don't know how much time I have." I pulled him close, my arms around him, his scarf soft against my cheek. "We'll figure this out," I promised. "Together." But as I said it, doubt crept in. What if I couldn't protect him? What if this was bigger than us? The next morning, Lena called me, her voice urgent. "Ethan, I traced one of the burner accounts. It's linked to a server in Wisconsin, some small town called Haven. Does that mean anything to Owen?" When I told him, his face went pale. "That's where they're based," he said. "Haven's their home." We were getting closer, but the closer we got, the more dangerous it felt. That night, Owen stayed at my apartment, the first time he'd been there. We didn't sleep, just talked, our voices low, the city's hum outside my window. He told me about his dreams, writing a novel, traveling somewhere far from Haven's reach. I told him about mine, a life where I wasn't afraid to love, to be seen. As dawn broke, he kissed me, soft and tentative, and for a moment, the world felt safe. But safety was an illusion. The next day, as I left work, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Tell your boyfriend to stop digging, or you'll both regret it." The message burned into my phone screen. "Tell your boyfriend to stop digging, or you'll both regret it." I stood frozen on the sidewalk outside my office, the Chicago wind biting at my face, my mind racing. They knew about me, not just Owen, but me. I showed him the message that night, his face draining of color as he read it. "This is my fault," he whispered, sitting on my couch, his red scarf still around his neck like a lifeline. "I dragged you into this, Ethan." "No," I said firmly, kneeling in front of him. "I chose this. I chose you." His eyes met mine, and for a moment we were just two people, not a data analyst and a man on the run, but two souls tangled in something bigger than fear. I kissed him, fierce and desperate, and he kissed me back, his hands clutching my shoulders like I was his anchor. But the fear didn't vanish. We spent the night strategizing, our laptops open, Lena's notes scattered across my coffee table. She dug deeper into the server in Haven, finding encrypted forums linked to the group, a network of people obsessed with control, cloaked in the guise of community values. Their rhetoric was chilling, a mix of religious zeal and veiled threats. And Owen's name appeared in coded posts, marked as a traitor. Lena's voice was steady over the phone. "We've got enough to go to the police, Ethan. This isn't just harassment. It's stalking." The next day, we went to the Chicago PD, a precinct near the Loop that smelled of coffee and paperwork. The officer, a middle-aged woman named Detective Ruiz, listened as we laid out everything. Owen's past, the messages, the car, the server in Haven. She took notes, her expression unreadable. But when Owen mentioned the group's threats, her eyes sharpened. "This sounds like a pattern," she said. "We've had reports of similar groups targeting people across state lines. I'll need time to dig into this." Time. The one thing we weren't sure we had. As we left the precinct, Owen's hand found mine, his grip tight. "Thank you," he said, "for believing me." I squeezed his hand, but my mind was on the SUV, the messages, the shadow of Haven looming over us. Days passed with no word from Ruiz, and the tension grew. Owen stayed at my apartment, his presence a comfort and a reminder of the stakes. We cooked together, laughed at bad TV, stole kisses in the quiet moments. But the threat lingered, a constant hum beneath our fragile happiness. One night, as we sat on my balcony, the city sprawling below, he said, "If something happens to me, Ethan, promise you'll keep going. You're stronger than you think." "Don't talk like that," I snapped, my voice sharper than I meant. "Nothing's going to happen." But his words haunted me, a reminder that love, even this fierce, wasn't a shield. Then, on a frigid Tuesday morning, Ruiz called. "We've got a lead," she said. "The server in Havens linked to a man named Victor Callahan. He's got a record, harassment, intimidation, nothing major, but enough to flag him. We're coordinating with Wisconsin PD to look into it." She paused. "But Ethan, Owen needs to stay low. These people don't mess around." I told Owen, and his face hardened. "Victor," he said, spitting the name like a curse. "He was like a father to me once, until I refused to be what he wanted." He told me more, how Victor had groomed him, promised him a family, then turned when Owen came out. The betrayal cut deep, and I saw it in the way Owen's hands trembled, the way his eyes darted to the window. We decided to lay low, sticking to my apartment, avoiding our usual haunts. Lena kept digging, her cybersecurity skills uncovering more, a list of names tied to the group, some in Chicago. One name stood out: Marcus Tate, a man in his 40s, male who owned a consulting firm in the Loop. Lena found his photo online and Owen's breath caught. "That's him," he said. "The guy in the SUV." We gave the name to Ruiz, and the pieces started falling into place. Tate was a peripheral member of the group, a fixer who handled their problems in Chicago. Ruiz warned us to stay put, but the waiting was torture. Every creak in my apartment, every shadow on the street, felt like a threat. Owen was restless, pacing, his scarf a constant reminder of the night we met. "I can't keep hiding," he said one night. "I need to face this." "No," I said, grabbing his arm. "We do this together or not at all." He looked at me, his eyes soft, and nodded. But I could see the fight in him, the need to reclaim his life. The breakthrough came a week later. Ruiz called again, her voice brisk. "We've got Tate in custody. He's talking, implicating Victor and others. We're building a case, but you two need to stay out of sight until we've got more." Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. That night, as Owen and I sat on my couch, a brick crashed through my window, glass shattering across the floor. A note was tied to it, scrawled in Sharpie, "You can't hide forever." Owen's face went white, and I pulled him close, my heart pounding. "We're okay," I whispered, but the words felt hollow. The group wasn't done with us, and I wasn't sure how much fight we had left. The brick lay among the glass shards on my apartment floor, the note's words, "You can't hide forever," searing into my mind. Owen stood frozen, his red scarf clutched in his hands, his eyes wide with fear and something fiercer, defiance. "They're trying to scare us," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "But I'm done being afraid." I wanted to argue, to beg him to stay safe, but I saw the fire in him, the same fire I'd fallen for in his messages months ago. We called Ruiz, who arrived within the hour, her face grim as she bagged the brick and note as evidence. "This is escalation," she said. "You two need to relocate. Somewhere they can't find you." Relocate. The word felt like a betrayal of the life we were building. But Ruiz was right. We packed light, clothes, laptops, Owen's scarf, and moved to a safe house in Evanston, a nondescript apartment arranged by the police. It was sterile, temporary, but as we settled in, Owen's hand found mine, and I felt a flicker of hope. We were together, and that was enough for now. Ruiz kept us updated. Tate's confession had cracked the group wide open, exposing a network that stretched from Wisconsin to Illinois, a web of intimidation targeting anyone who dared defy their rules. Victor was in custody, but others were still out there, and the note proved they weren't backing down. "Stay vigilant," Ruiz warned. "This isn't over." In the safe house, Owen and I grew closer, our days filled with quiet moments. Cooking breakfast, sharing stories, planning a future we weren't sure we'd have. He told me about his childhood, the small joys he'd found despite the suffocating rules of Haven. I told him about mine, The years spent hiding who I was, the freedom I'd found in Chicago. We kissed, we laughed, we held each other through the fear, and I realized love wasn't just romance. It was fighting for each other, even when the odds were against us. Lena visited when she could, bringing updates and her unshakable optimism. She'd hack deeper into the group's forums, passing intel to Ruiz that helped identify more members. "You're like a superhero," I told her, and she laughed, brushing it off. But her work was saving us, piece by piece. One night, as snow fell outside the safe house, Owen turned to me, his eyes serious. "If we get through this, Ethan, I want a real life with you. No aliases, no running. Just us." I kissed him, my heart full, and promised we'd make it happen. But the fear lingered, a shadow we couldn't outrun. The end came faster than we expected. 2 weeks after the brick, Ruiz called with news. The group's leadership had been dismantled, their funding cut off, their members scattered or arrested. Victor had confessed, desperate to save himself, and the threats stopped. "You're safe," Ruiz said, but her voice held a caution. "Stay sharp. Some of these people hold grudges." We returned to my apartment, the broken window fixed, the glass swept away. But the scars remained. Owen's wariness, my hypervigilance, the way we both jumped at loud noises. Yet, as we stood on my balcony, the Chicago skyline glowing under a winter moon, I felt a shift. We'd faced the worst and come out stronger, together. Owen kept his promise. He deleted Kai's accounts, started using his real name, and began writing again. Not code, but a novel, pouring his story into pages that felt like a reclamation of his life. I went back to work, my spreadsheets less suffocating now, knowing I had someone waiting for me. Lena, ever our cheerleader, threw us a small party when the case closed, toasting to love kicking fear's ass. Months later, we stood in Lincoln Park again, by the lagoon, the same bench where we'd first met. Owen wore his red scarf, a symbol now of survival, not secrecy. He took my hand, his smile warm, and said, "I was wrong, Ethan. You're not my final goodbye. You're my beginning." I laughed, pulling him close, the city's lights wrapping us in their glow. We'd fought for this moment, for each other, for a love that refused to be silenced. And as we walked through the park, hand in hand, I knew we'd keep fighting, not just for us, but for everyone who deserved to love without fear. Because in the end, love wasn't just our truth, it was our triumph.